Welcome back, everybody, to Roompact's ResEdChat podcast. If you're new to the show, every other week we feature a variety of topics of interest to hired professionals who work in and with university housing, residence life, residential education, whatever you might call it. But every once in a while, we do kind of these special episodes, just sort of internal with folks on the team, talking about what kind of work is happening, new things that are going on at Roompact, just kind of digging deeper in sort of the company, the culture, the things that Roompact does and cares about. So kind of came up with a sort of a clever topic, I feel like, for this one of creating moments of magic. I think just the way that sort of a community supports each other, validates each other, cares about each other. I feel like all kind of lumps together in something like this idea of creating moments of magic. And but I won't kind of steal your thunder, Matt, the fearless leader of Roompact, here to talk about this topic here. So I'm curious, though. That was kind of my like take on this topic. But how would you define moments of magic, and then we'll kind of dig into more detail of how that kind of shows up in the room pack world?
There's a good story I read about from Disney. So there was a family in Disney World, and the family, it was like a family of four or something. And they all went and got scoops of ice cream. And that's probably what, like $10 a scoop these days. So one of the little kids walked away from the ice cream stand, took a lick of the ice cream cone, and the ice cream immediately fell onto the ground. And the kids started crying. There was a huge line behind the family, so they couldn't like get back in line to talk to them and ask if they could get a new scoop. But the family turned around, and there was a cast member, someone who works at Disney, there with a new scoop for the kid. And what happened was Disney just has so many people working around, and they're trained so well that someone noticed that there was an issue. And it was a lower level staff member, it wasn't a manager or anything. And they noticed that there was a problem. It was going to be pretty cheap to resolve. So they just walked right into the ice cream booth, scooped a new scoop, and gave it right to the family. And it was significant because they didn't need to get approval from anyone. They knew that that was the kind of company culture that they were aiming for. And I think that little story embodies kind of what we're going for with a moment of magic. Because that family, the emotions that that family felt, they will remember for a very long time. They had a really low low, and then someone brought them back up. They didn't need to ask for it; it just happened, and they're going to remember that for a while.
Yeah, and I guess 'cause real quick, like I feel like there's portions of that, like you said, like they didn't need to like go through a whole approval process, but like it's also that idea of like sort of the empowerment or sort of the like responsibility, because there could be that idea of like, well, yeah, there's a bunch of people working, in any area at any given time. You could imagine that there's scenario where like somebody is just like, I'm sure somebody else will take care of this or whatever, even though like they might have had part of the training that's saying like, no, yeah, try to like, create moments of magic, help people, have a great experience. So like, is there an aspect of that, I guess, that just to sort of like zero in on it, that idea that you're really trying to empower people to like kind of take action and feel sort of responsibility to be like, I can take care of that really quickly, cheaply, and I'm just going to do it and not assume somebody else is going to.
100%. The empowerment is such an important piece. You cannot micromanage. You have to trust the people that you work with. And it has to be truly a part of your values and your culture as a company for it to work. And when we think about it, we had always kind of done it at Roompact, but we never really put it to paper. It's now one of our official values of we aim to make moments of magic. But before that, it was just something we did. And I think the way that we kind of quantify it internally, it's hard to quantify because it's more of a feeling than it is anything you can measure. But there's a few things that you can do to create the moment of magic. One is exceptional service. So you can go above and beyond when someone is using your product or working with you in a way that they wouldn't have expected. And then another one is like gifts. If you know that someone recently had a new child or someone is moving to a new job or something like that, and you send them a gift, no words spoken, it just shows up, that can really make an impact. And then there's kind of a third hidden one that I would consider, and that is product design. So you can create little almost Easter eggs in your product where a specific subset of people would say, oh man, that is really cool that they did that in their product. I think that's pretty specific to software like ours. I don't think you can do that in all companies, but it can be very impactful.
Yeah, that's what I think is interesting is part of that, yeah, is like I guess that's why sort of the moments of magic is like a very good like descriptor. It's like it's sort of the flourishes. It's a sort of like that idea of, yeah, like if it's when you do a certain thing, just the way that it sort of like pops up, or maybe there's like a little joke or something, whatever. It's just like, oh, like it's fun. It's sort of like recognizing, like you said, like a certain subset. It's like, hey, you just did a thing that's really cool, or like, and I guess I know sometimes like, because I think you'd maybe see this most in, yeah, like customer service or like hospitality or something, is that like, they try to create, yeah, those little like Easter eggs. If it's like, oh, in your room, maybe, yeah, they put a little like, like certain resorts or whatever, they put little like towels and shapes, or if there's like different things like that, it's like those flourishes, but it's the idea of like, I guess all of this feels like, I know we did a episode a while back that was talking to somebody about sort of like this sort of like Disney philosophy, like customer service, but like this is starting to get a little bit more tactical, which I think is good. That idea of like, okay, we want to train and empower and sort of reinforce with our team to take that responsibility to address like, I guess we'll try to keep it within the sort of software world, but like if there's a bug or some sort of like issue or problem or question, like everybody feels sort of willing and able to address those things and do it, as it's appropriate in sort of a maybe a fun, like a fun way, or sort of an authentic and just sort of genuine, kind of human way. Because I think those are ways that you show a level of care, and you show uh, just sort of like an empathy, you show, sort of respect, and just kind of all those sort of things. But I guess, because this is sort of my second question, that idea of like, what makes this so important when it comes to like the room packed experience? Like, clearly, I guess, yeah, it was like part of your thinking, and it was sort of an intangible thing for a while. But like, I guess observing where it's like, it's always like a small team, and just sort of like those sort of things, you felt like it was like just more important to do because you were small, or just sort of like, what was that sort of thinking of like why it felt like it was sort of a bedrock thing that eventually is now sort of a like foundational company value?
Sure. I mean, the fact that we're small definitely, I think, encourages it, because when we are competing with a much larger company will typically have like a very corporate environment where they almost keep their partners at arm's length, and they have more of a transactional relationship. And that was never something that were or are interested at Roompact. We want to go all in. And really, we also have a very long-term view of Roompact. So I want to be working in Roompact for 10, 20, 30 more years. And doing these little things makes it fun. The other route is the corporate route, and I think that's just a little bit it's a lot boring, and I'm not really interested in that. A couple other important pieces for us are just the fact that when you do create a moment of magic, you're creating a feeling, and it's easy to forget a lot of things when you're working with a vendor. So it's like, yeah, at the end of the day, we're giving you a software product that's not like sexy, that's not necessarily cool. It's a tool, and you need to use the tool for your job, and it better work. And that's really probably what most people care about at the end of the day. But like you said, when you can add a little flourish, you're adding this feeling, a certain moment in time that people can remember for a very long time. And I think that's really important, because I've experienced it with companies or people or friends or family. And those are the memories that stick out to me the most.
Yeah, and I guess it's like even the thing of maybe they did not remember exactly what you did. It's that notion of like they'll remember how you made them feel, kind of thing, and the idea of like that being an important bedrock of just building kind of durable relationships. Which I think if it's like, yeah, we recognize sort of uh, the dichotomy here of like, vendor and institution. That's what the kind of uh sort of setup is here, but you would hope that it could be a true sort of partnership and relationship, and that sort of like emotional piece, I guess, yeah, would be sort of the driver that would enable, these relationships to sort of last and be sort of fruitful and impactful and all of that. But yeah, so I think because that, maybe I'll just do this as sort of a brief follow-up too, but like I think it gets to kind of my next question too, but like the idea of, well, the feeling is ultimately the most important thing that matters. Like if they feel cared for, they feel respected, they feel like they had a little bit of fun, in an otherwise just sort of like, routine day or whatever. Um, to me, that should hopefully help and kind of motivate people to like, it can be very small thing. That idea of like, oh, well, like, I mean, I got to send everybody a gift or something, but like what gift, or does it have to be like a big thing? So like, what's your thinking on that of sort of just like the overarching sort of like, what the sort of acts are, so the size of them or the shape of them, because just speak to that a little bit, then we'll get into more just any specific examples you can think of. But just sort of that notion of like that might deter people, where it's like, oh, I'd feel it's like kind of daunting or sort of, uh, it would kind of make me anxious, I guess, of like it feels like it might be bigger than me of like kind of these moments of magic. Like, what would you kind of say, I guess, to somebody who's kind of feeling reticent in that way?
Well, first, I'd probably say you can't fake it. So if you're feeling like it's just not something that is coming to you, don't worry about it. That means that that's not kind of your moment to make. But then beyond that, it doesn't have to be huge. Sometimes it could just be like a text message or an email, like, hey, happy birthday. Because I think, especially in professional environments, people aren't necessarily used to that. So if you can put a personal touch in a professional environment, I think that's really helpful. So it could be something as small as an email or a text message. But then if you do want to get a little bit bigger, like sending a gift, we use the website goldbelly.com to send folks food. As far as gifts go, you never know what size somebody is. You never know what they're going to be into or what they like. Generally, people need to eat food. You might run into someone who has food limitations, and in that case, hopefully, you would know that. But just picking out some food for somebody and sending it to them, I think, can be a really good moment.
Yeah, 'cause yeah, that's like a good call out, and we'll put the link to that organization in the show notes. But um, yeah, that idea of like everybody loves snacks, just the idea is like, even if it's not like they'll appreciate again, like they'll get the feeling of like, wow, that was so nice that they sent it. And it's like, even if it's like I try to, it's like not my thing. It might be like, hey, maybe my spouse or my kids or my friend or whoever, like I'll bring it into the office, I'll put it in the break room, like those sort of things. Like the idea of like hopefully like it will be eaten because people have to eat, and like a lot of people like a lot of things, so like don't even get too in your head about that. And hopefully, yeah, if you have sort of um different mechanisms, yeah, to like kind of know what folks might like, that could you can kind of zero in that target a little bit easier. But yeah, it's like, send a card, like that idea of like, oh, it's handwritten, and like, that sort of has a little bit of different vibe. But like, because that's what I think is the idea of, you send an email or whatever else. It's like, calling it a birthday, or, like you said, like a particular life milestone, like a couple of sentences, and it's like personalized to that content. It's like that's the idea. Like it is brief, but it is personalized, and that doesn't mean that it has to be a whole essay and sort of kind of long drawn out thing or some huge, expensive gift. It's just that you know kind of thinking of you. That's why there's like the whole section of like sort of kind of greeting cards and stuff where it's just like just because and all that. It's like that's the idea. Like, and it can be like you're giving that example. Like it certainly can be triggered by something, if it is sort of, and that idea of like, oh, a problem came up, like, a bug in the software, I can like sort of squash that. And you might want to just make it clear if it like came up because of sort of uh, like a help desk ticket or something. That idea of it's like somebody felt empowered to address that, and it was super quick, and just being like, hey, I saw this, and I just want to make sure I got it taken care of for you and all that. Like they'll understand obviously that like that was a level of care and sort of creating that moment of magic of like, oh my gosh, you addressed that so quickly and you just like solved it. And that that made my day, because I maybe was like hitting a wall, I was trying to do something and I couldn't, and now I can. This is great. Like I didn't have to like sit around kind of twiddling my thumbs because of like I was trying to get this task done. So but yeah, any other examples, I guess, because I feel this is part of it, I guess, getting into that kind of tactical piece of like you know a moment of magic can be a lot of things. So hopefully, just giving as many sort of anecdotal examples of the way that you've kind of navigated this or seen it navigated elsewhere, hopefully can just start getting kind of the juices flowing and people thinking and brainstorming. So any other things that you could think of that you'd want to share of like examples of how you've done this for like your customers, or I guess seen elsewhere?
I think the first one, which is the most cookie cutter, is gifts. So, like I said, sending food to someone. If you don't know if they have any dietary limitations, you can send a gift card. But that requires you to have kind of a good rapport with your clients. So, if you know that a client recently had surgery, or like I mentioned earlier, had a baby or something like that, that's a really easy, generally, moment for you to make one of these moments of magic. And I think it's important not to give them a heads up. So it just shows up. It might show up in their email inbox, it might show up in person, but having it show up, I think, is significant for that. So that's kind of the easier end of the spectrum. You mentioned thank you notes earlier. Handwritten cards are very important. My colleague Paul Brown is really good at that. when we send a end of the year card to clients or a thank you note, it's never going to be just like a plain card with our logo or something like that. It always has something like student affairs pop art or just something that'll be cute to put on your desk. Our goal is that if we send you something, even if it's a card, you're going to want to put it on your desk because it's neat. Same goes with business cards. We don't just have business cards. We, on the opposite side of our business card, we have what's called a student affairs trading card with significant folks from the field of student affairs. So we don't want to just create paper to have paper, whether it be business cards or notes. We want it to be kind of neat. So that's one. And then another one is you mentioned bugs with kind of coding or programming our software. There was a really cool moment at our last users meetup where it's in October every year. And we met up, and Paul, my colleague, was presenting at the front of the room on a brand new feature that we had just released. And our software engineers were sitting in the back of the room. And as Paul's demoing the software, we had one of our partner institution, someone from a partner institution, raise their hand and say, "Hey, it'd be really great if you added this to the new feature." And Paul said, "Yeah, that would be really great." And he like made eyes with our software engineers in the back, and there was like communication, nonverbal communication there. And by the time Paul was done presenting, the engineers added that feature and released it. So at the end of the presentation, Paul said, "Hey, great news. That was a great idea for this new feature, and we've already added it, all within an hour or so." It was really neat. Um, and then I think kind of another one, which is more day in and day out, is that exceptional service piece. So going above and beyond what people are used to, working in kind of your field. So for us, we're compared to other software vendors. So folks work with software vendors quite often in higher education, and oftentimes you'll need to submit a support ticket via email or something like that. And I think nowadays people are used to relatively slow turnaround times. Like if I send an email to a vendor, I hope to hear back by tomorrow, but there probably won't be a resolution. It'll be something like, "Oh, I'm reaching out to this person," or "I'm handing you off." So it generally, I think, takes a long time to get a response and a resolution from a software vendor. And our goal is to just destroy all of those benchmarks and come in way under and answer people very fast and answer them effectively. So I think doing that really surprises people. And there's another kind of taking that even further. What you can do is if one of your clients is in a bind, I think that's an option for a moment of magic. So one example is one of our clients. They're in the middle of closings. It's a Friday evening. It's like 5 or 6 o'clock my time, and someone reaches out to me from a campus. Well, they reach out to our support email, and they say, "Hey, I just realized that we sent you the wrong data this morning, and all the data that is in Roompact is not right. We're doing checkouts tomorrow morning starting at 8 a.m. And I don't expect you to do anything because like it's too late. It's totally my fault, but I hope by Monday you can get this resolved for me." And even if it's a little bit late, if it ends up being 7, 8, 9 at night and it's a Friday and I see something like that, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take care of it. I'm going to fix it. Because that's a moment where one of our clients, thought that because of their own actions, they were in a bind and it wasn't really their fault. So we're going to step in and we're going to fix it, even if it's outside of business hours, even if it's not expected. Because when you do that, they're going to remember it for a long time when you're able to kind of help get them out of a jam.
Yeah, and part of my thinking with this is like, I don't know in that example how long necessarily it took you to like fix an issue, but like my mind is like if I catch sort of a request like that, if it's like it's going to take me like 5 minutes or less, or like it's a quick thing for me, but it'll be hugely helpful to them because again, that is, I mean, it seems like they would have been pushing forward amidst that sort of like discrepancy or whatever, but like you know if it was something where they were hitting a wall, like I know in my background, there's a lot of instances where somebody was like trying to register for something and there's an error, and it's like I can easily fix this for you, but like you're going to be stuck until somebody helps you. But what I'm thinking of too, though, is what you were talking about, how like you've recognized that as a smaller company and being kind of more nimble and flexible and all that, like that was a big differentiator, and that you're kind of really trying to kind of harness that potential and everything. Like, um, as we close out, because I think that's the idea of like if you, as an organization, college, university, or otherwise, like can try to embody that as much as possible, like sort of imbue that sort of like that empowerment, that responsibility, that ability for like directors of departments or whatever to sort of like do that versus it needing to kind of go through however many sort of levels of bureaucracy. Like that is, I think, a sort of a call to action. Is that like, sure, you might be a big organization, you might feel like, oh well, we can never do anything like that, but if you start to like zero in on sort of each department, like they would know how to create those moments of magic in their sort of context and try to support them in doing that. But um so if you want to kind of elaborate, I guess, on an idea like that of just like advice that you would have for others incorporating something like this like into their practice.
I think I've more or less said them throughout our conversation, but just to sum them up, one of them is you can't fake it. So you can't just say, this is now a value that we're going to go for as a department. I think you need to actually care about it. You actually have to want to do it. You actually have to feel it. Like this is a cool thing that you want to do. I don't think that you can just write it in a handbook and it happens. Um, and I think it's important for leaders of a department or an organization to do it themselves, to set an example of this is what it's going to look like. Another piece is, I think, like you have mentioned, Dustin, like every team member, regardless of their standing in the organization, they have to have latitude to do something like this without worrying about negative repercussions. So, from a departmental standpoint, you might say if there's anything that you can do under $20 or under $50 or something like that, just do it and then we'll talk about it later. And I'm sure it'll be fine. Um, and then I think another one to pay attention to, this is something that we need to pay attention to at Roompact, is not to let something like this impede on your other values. And I say that almost directly, kind of almost in opposition to one of the examples I gave, where I don't want people at Roompact staying up at 8 or 9 or 10 p.m. looking at our support line so that they can make a moment of magic. I think it's really important that work life balance and all the other values that we or whatever department might have, they're very important too. So there's a little bit of a juxtaposition when it comes to creating these moments of magic with some of the other values that you might have. So just keep an eye on that.
Yeah, and I think it's a helpful reminder because I think if there's sort of a like serendipity or sort of this like moment where like, oh, I just happened to catch this, I'm recognizing like it'd be hugely impactful for them, not take me too much time or cost that much money, whatever. Like, because that's what I think certainly maybe certain people or certain departments or certain organizations would need is like you said, like, okay, if it seems like we need to put a dollar amount to it so it helps people to kind of get it right in their heads or a amount of time of effort or whatever else, like certainly that level of structure that really actually can just depend on the context. But um yeah, I think that's for me sometimes I liked to kind of always like peek into my email inbox when I was working with students every once in a while just to like kind of quickly scan and certain things it's like they're fine. This can wait. Other things like I can't take care of this quickly, and that'll be hugely helpful to them. So I think it's yeah, kind of trying to uh, hone that discernment and have, like you said, that value be kind of authentically integrated into your organization. And I think as time goes on, you'd hopefully be able to like uh, leverage different examples and say like, hey, that one time that like this guy on the team did this, like that's a good example. That's like this time is like, well, I mean, I don't think we really want to set that expectation that's required. Yeah, to be staying up at all hours and checking that like so like that can be part of it is like knowing if you can start somewhere and try to kind of get some momentum and really reinforce it you'll start to I think kind of bridge the gaps, I guess, in people's understandings, or if they're feeling kind of reticent about like, trying to do things. Yeah, put the structure in where it makes sense, and then start to kind of uplift and celebrate, the examples that you're seeing from the team. So, but yeah, I think it's all really good advice, and I think it, really, yeah, really good sort of tangible. Kind of manifestation of just sort of like, oh, we pride ourselves in giving good customer service. It's like, but how? It's like, and this is all really good examples of how. So, appreciate you sharing those. Yeah.
One last resource that I totally forgot to mention is the book Delivering Happiness. I think it's by Tony Say of Zappos. So it talks about how Zappos did this in their early days before they were eaten up by Amazon. They had their own corporate culture, and that book has some really fantastic examples of how to do this while you are selling shoes over the internet. And that's where we got a lot of our inspiration from as well.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, that one's like a classic one. It is kind of, I guess, like funny in hindsight, where like some people would be like, "No, well, I mean, like, yeah, they're just part of like sort of the machine of Amazon now." But it's like, sure, whatever. But like, how did they get to a point to be valuable enough or sort of appealing enough for like a company like that to be like, we want you, we need that, that's so great, or whatever? And like, there's other sort of business school lessons to be learned about like acquisitions and those sort of things. But like, yeah, the idea like that was something that was a huge kind of badge of honor for them. And like, there's many organizations I think that have like taken inspiration over the years where like and that's just sort of a net benefit for us all that I think like it is now such a powerful example that they were able to kind of set and that they almost kind of have this like playbook to follow, and it's like it's great stuff. Um, but yeah, so we'll link up to that. The other stuff that we mentioned, have ways to connect with you. Folks maybe want to, ask some follow up questions and stuff in the description, show notes for the episode here. But just thank you so much for hanging out and sharing all that you did, and obviously just helping to create moments of magic in the world. It's great stuff, and just appreciate your time.
Of course. Thank you, Dustin. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.